Hello.
Hello, teacher Michael. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good, thank you. Thanks for asking. So
Good.
we
Is
could finally meet.
yes, it's very good to meet you. It's Meysam, is that right?
Yes, Meysam, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
great to meet you.
Great to meet you too. Thank you very much. So without further ado, let's do the meeting and without losing any time
Mhm.
because I think
Yeah,
you're in a
absolutely.
hurry. Cool. Okay. Teacher Michael, speaking of motivation, how can we motivate language learners? What do you think about this?
Yeah, good question. So I think, of course, motivation is very important. I think it depends if you mean like self-motivation or from like a teacher's point of view. So I think in terms of self-motivation, maybe you know, immersing yourself in the culture, kind of listening to music, like say English music, things like that, I think is really good, sneaky ways to get that kind of motivation. Um, as for teachers, I think it's important that teachers kind of make a connection between language and real life use. So it's not just stuff that you'll never use in reality, but I think seeing the practical side can be quite motivating too. But I always like to say to my students that motivation is important, but it's not the only thing. Because I think if you only rely on motivation to study, then you're not going to study every day. So I also think, in addition to motivation, you need to have like good habits in place as well. So you have that habit to study every day too. Yeah,
Fantastic.
what I would
Very
say.
good. Thank you. Okay. It says here, what are the probable problems of students while they are studying and learning?
The problems that students might face when they're
Yeah.
learning.
Yes, yes, sure.
Um, Well, yeah, going back to my first one, I would say habits is a big one. So I always compare it to like brushing your teeth. So when you brush your teeth, you don't have to think about it or plan it. It's just a habit. And I think if language learning or English learning can become the same, that's perfect because you can wake up or whatever and sit down and study, and it's not even something you have to think about. And I think that already is a big problem that many people face is finding the time and the motivation to do it. Um, I think as well, people don't think about why they need to learn English. So perhaps someone might have maybe someone wants to travel and that's why they want to learn English. But then they're kind of studying all of these almost useless vocabulary about, in the office and things like staples and tape and all this kind of office equipment that wouldn't be that useful for them. So I think that can be another problem that many people don't consider.
Cool. Exactly. Yeah. What sort of material would you recommend them to use? Like, sorry, books, apps, websites, or some other digital platforms, whatever.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it can be quite subjective. So like it depends on the person. To summarize, maybe just whatever the learner finds fun. So in my opinion, fun is more important than efficiency.
Mhm.
Even if there's not as much vocab or grammar, I think if you find it fun, that's most important. But yeah, like personally, I like to go for like blogs or podcasts or videos that I find interesting.
Yeah.
And when I do come across grammar or something that I find difficult, then I would maybe use a book or online resource to help, but only when I get stuck. But in terms of like specific recommendations, I'm not really loyal to any one resource. I just like whatever I find on the internet is fine for me. So
Mhm.
there's not one specific thing I would recommend. Just whatever works for each individual person.
I see. Yeah, possible, of course.
Yeah.
Grammar and vocabulary. Which one is important and why? Plus, how can learners improve their grammar and vocabulary?
Huge question.
I
um,
love huge questions, actually.
Yeah, I think, but both are definitely important, of course.
Hmm.
Um, there is a difference that I think if you have a lack of grammar, you can still be understood. Because I've been to Spain with no language, just some words, and people still understand me.
Hmm.
But if you have a lack of vocabulary, that will hinder, like stop people from understanding you. So I would say vocabulary is incredibly important. Grammar is obviously also important, but maybe not as much.
Hmm.
But I'm a big advocate of like natural methods. So like not studying grammar before you need it. So for example, if you're reading a book or listening to something, then you see the grammar, then you can study. But I think many people will make the maybe not mistake, but many people will study like advanced grammar that maybe we rarely use,
Yeah.
but it's in a textbook.
Hmm.
So I think that is something that you could avoid.
Yeah.
But yeah, so basically study in context and yeah, pick it up as you go. That's my preferred method anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. Mine too.
Oh, excellent.
Um, sure. And okay, very silly question to ask from a native speaker. How did you personally learn English?
um, I don't really remember. So of course I was a baby. It is interesting to think about the differences between, you know, how babies learn and how adults can learn.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what to say.
Okay, let's
I can
say,
talk about my Japanese learning if you like. Um, like I mentioned it a bit already, but I'm learning Japanese, and in that I basically just do every day a bit of reading, a bit of listening, podcasts, YouTube videos, and then some flashcards. And the final thing I do is have like a weekly conversation with my language tutor. So I try to kind of keep it simple, but access or use the same, you know, areas, the main areas like reading, listening, speaking,
yeah,
but keep it simple. That's my method.
cool. Okay, let's say, where are you originally from?
Originally, I'm from England. I'm from Cornwall, which is like an area in the southwest of England.
Nice.
Um, and we do actually have our own language in Cornwall, the
Really?
Cornish language.
Really?
But these days, it's only like 200 people speak it. So
Mm.
I don't know it actually.
Is that close to English or completely
No,
different?
not at all actually. So it's got a completely different history to English. It's kind of
Interesting.
similar to Welsh or Scottish, but yeah, it's definitely interesting if anyone
Hmm, I
has the
didn't
time
know that.
to
Hmm.
look into that. Yeah.
Cool, cool. Okay, is it possible to learn multiple languages at the same time? And would you recommend that?
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's possible because I'm doing that at the moment. Uh, if people do that, like I'm a big fan of like the 80-20 rule, which is having one language as the dominant language, like maybe studying 80% one language, 20% the other language. Because if it's 50-50, it might become a bit confusing and progress will be quite slow. Um, of course, if your goal is to get fluent in English, then picking up a second language will maybe double your time to get fluent. But yeah, I think if you have the passion for two languages and you think it would be fun, then yeah, you can go for it. And yeah, I think enjoyment is the most important thing, really.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Because these are frequently asked questions. That is
Hmm.
why I put it in this, question, let's say interview questions. But of course, the answer is so obvious. Yeah, it is possible, of course.
Yeah, I used to be learning like three languages at once, but then I found my progress was so slow. I kind of cut it down to two. But yeah, I think you have to find that balance, don't you,
Yeah,
between what you want to do and how quickly you want to make progress, I guess.
yeah,
Hmm.
exactly, exactly. Okay, how can learners improve their speaking abilities? Yeah, I am fed up with this question.
Yeah, I get this question every day.
Yeah.
Um, very simply, practice. Um, that There are other things you can do, like I think listening can help because it helps you get used to the collocations, the expressions, the sound of the language and the accents, which, you know, does have a role to play in speaking. But I think the best thing is just to practice speaking. So you can speak to yourself. I know many learners talk to themselves when they're doing housework and that kind of stuff, narrating their life. The thing I would recommend most highly is getting like an online teacher or a language partner. Doesn't have to be a native speaker. Uh, Someone to practice with maybe once a week at least. I think that's the best way.
Mm,
Quite simple.
I see. Yeah, possible. Um, Accent and pronunciation, which one is really important? Uh, and of course, we have American English versus British English. Which one should a language learner, choose or select?
Yeah, that's a good question too.
Yeah, really big
Um,
question.
yeah, I think so. I'm kind of stealing this. So some people may know the teacher on Instagram called Teacher Will,
Yeah.
and he he said this phrase that I really love. He says, "Focus on fluency,
Mhm.
and the accent will follow naturally in time." So I love that. That I think a lot of people focus too much on accent at the beginning and kind of forget about becoming fluent in the language, and that can make people sound unnatural if they do that too much. So I think fluency is the most important. Um, Pronunciation is vital to be understood. If you have bad pronunciation, you won't be understood. But accent is a bit different because everyone has their own accent. You know, I have a different accent to my even my family, to a lot of my friends. Um, that doesn't really matter because it just shows where you're from.
Yeah.
But I think pronunciation is the key. And yeah, American or British, I think again, I think it depends on your individual goals.
Yeah.
So if you're, say if you're French and very close to England, you are planning to maybe travel to the UK, then of course maybe British English. But it just depends on your goals for the future. You could even study both at the same time. I think that's also fine. But yeah, it just depends on what you prefer. Some people will study both simultaneously, and some people will study one and then maybe study the other when they get to like an advanced level. But it doesn't really make any difference, I think, in the long term.
Oh, I see. Very nice. Very cool. Uh, okay. Is it possible to learn English without going abroad? Again, very cliche question.
Mhm. But yeah, absolutely. I definitely think it is because, yeah, I get this a lot too. But yeah, I think if you're going abroad, it can help, but I think it's over how much it can help is overestimated, over exaggerated maybe. I think if you're a very outgoing and extroverted person, you can make a lot of friends if you travel. It can be very helpful. But if you're a bit more introverted or shy, then staying at home can be just as good. Because I stayed in Japan for 1 month when I
Really?
was very shy at this point, and I really didn't improve at all. Um, so I think if you're at home, you can surround yourself with English through the internet, media, go to restaurants that maybe don't speak your language, they can speak English, meetups, all this kind of stuff. I think for most people in the 21st century, there's no excuse
Yeah.
not to learn because we have the internet these days.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Mm.
Uh, okay. How long will it take for a person to really learn every necessary element of language to speak it properly?
I like it. Another cliche question.
Very cliche question. Yeah.
It's I don't know if you'll expect this, but I think it's real. In my opinion, it's impossible to say. I think it depends on many factors, such as your motivation, how much time you invest in learning, your ability to learn. I think everyone has a different natural ability of how quickly they can memorize, and also what it means to you to speak properly, because I think it depends on your goals. So if you want to get a job in London, then you need a high level of English. But if you want to just make friends in the pub, then maybe you won't need quite as high to speak, properly. So I think that depends. But what I would advise to people asking this question is, rather than focusing on the long term, thinking how long will it take, is to focus on the small wins. So, for example, yeah, I just had one successful conversation. I had one talk with a native speaker or English speaker, and it didn't go too badly. And that can be like a thing to celebrate. And it's much more rewarding than waiting for the goal in a few years' time. So I
Mhm.
think, it's a continuing process, and language learning should be enjoyable. It shouldn't be like, oh, when is it going to happen? When am I going to get good? Yeah.
I see. Yeah, very nice. Okay, and it says here that technology and education. Do you think that integration of these two, let's say, elements can be a good idea or it can be harmful? What do you think about
Mm.
this?
Oh, yeah, yeah. This is a good question for me, I think. Maybe this answer will depend on people's age, I imagine. Um, but I love technology. I actually don't own a single piece of paper or a textbook. So all of my textbooks are digital, like PDFs, because I think there's so many benefits. I think you can have online teachers, of course. Like I'm an online teacher, so that's part of technology. You can have easy and often cheap access to resources from around the world.
Yeah.
You don't have to be in a place that has these physical textbooks, for example. Um, but of course, it can be harmful. It's not always black and white. So
Yeah.
if you're learning on your phone with an app, or like I have to do on YouTube, I think you have to be very strict with yourself and set boundaries, because as I have found with myself in the past, it's very easy to, get distracted by a random video about cats or something like that. And it can be dangerous if you don't have that discipline, I think. So with great power comes great responsibility. With that ability to use technology, you have to be responsible.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Very nice. Very cool. Okay, teacher Michael, thank you very much for accepting my invitation.
No,
And
my pleasure.
what you said actually was really valuable for both teachers and students, shortly speaking. I hope in the future we can, come up with some other, ideas or questions, and we can. I hope we can
Hmm.
do some other meetings too. Thank you very much again.
I'd be very happy to. Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.
My pleasure, man. Okay, take care of yourself then.
Thank you so much. I'll see you later.
See you later, man.
Bye
Bye bye.
bye.
Take care. Bye
Bye.
bye.